down to business.
When he drinks, he thinks.
That's the nectar of the gods, baby.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the #1 liquid-fueled, lubricated show on the interwebs. This is the Whiskey Musings Broadcast, and you know what? I think I hit a button that caused me to jump in just a fraction of a bit too early. It didn't go all the way through my typical countdown and everything else because, you know, I get distracted sometimes, and I go ahead and press buttons, and sometimes they do strange things, very, very weird and odd things. Anyway, welcome to the program. Thank you all for joining. I do appreciate it. Tonight I have a little bit more on the Twittergate thing. I don't know if anyone who is on Twitter who's been watching, some more got dumped, both yesterday and today, round 3 and 4. Got dumped in the last 48 hours. And while they didn't really reveal anything spectacularly magnanimous information that we didn't already know, there was a little bit information, or there was a little more things that kind of came out that pretty much confirmed what everybody kind of already knew. I've got that. Plus, I also have Kristen Sinema's departure from the Democrat Party into being an independent. There's a couple of theories that have been floated out there that I want to go over in terms of, why she did it, what is she looking to do, and that kind of stuff. And then I have a very interesting question for whiskey tonight that came in from Buddy Weiser. He sent it to me a couple weeks ago, but we've had so many things going on that I haven't had an opportunity to actually go and take a look at it, and then of course pull it out so that I can explain it all to you. Couple of things first before I get into those things. Couple of items. First of all, if you're planning on ordering anything from the Whiskey Musings gear store, the manufacturer of my products has basically put out that the 13th is the last day to order for standard shipping to be able to, I guess, get it by Christmas. I'm just going to toss that out there, before the end of the year. So obviously, if there is a rush that if there's something that you want, there's no guarantee on it being shipped. First of all, let me just put it that way. But if you order it before the 13th, you should be able to get it in time for them to be able to turn it around and kick it out to you prior to Christmas. And if you go there, you can use the word Christmas, all capital letters, and get a free gift from me of free shipping on everything on your order. So you can go ahead and do that. Now, obviously, if you're international, like Becky down in Australia, I'm sorry, Becky, but that's not going to fit for you. That's just domestic sending. So it's not going to fit for you, unfortunately. But, okay, so I'm checking on stuff. Yeah, so you might want to hurry. Buddy Weiser says better hurry on getting that information. But that is not tonight's that's not tonight's sponsor. So let me go ahead and get tonight's sponsor up here so that they can gain their time. So, wait a minute. Jeez, I hate doing this. All right. So, tonight's sponsor is the Institute on the Constitution. The Institute on the Constitution was established in 2004 as a 501c3 with nonprofit with one mission: to restore the constitutional republic through grassroots education. All courses and materials are developed using primary source documents and taught from the American view of law and government, as defined in the Declaration of Independence in the following 3 key points. 1, there is a God. 2, our rights come from him. And 3, the purpose of civil government is to secure and protect our God-given rights. The IOTC offers the opportunity to educate yourself on our most precious founding document, the Constitution of the United States. They also provide tools to educate your community and get involved with local government. Start by taking their free U.S. Constitution course and go from there. Use my affiliate link, iotc.whiskeymusings.online, to sign up. And while you are there, take a moment to look through their other course material and information. My affiliate link, once again, is iotc.whiskeymusings.online to get great content about our historical founding and support the show in the process. That's iotc.whiskeymusings.online. Or, if you just want to purchase this fabulous Saddleback leather-bound U.S. Constitution to support the show, great stocking stuffer. It has a 100-year guarantee against defects in materials and workmanship. The pages are water resistant, and take a look at this stitching. That is just absolutely wonderful stitching here, and it goes all the way through as the binder. That is just incredible. It is a great thing, and it'll help you to support the show. It's a good keepsake. So do me a favor and go to constitution.whiskeymusings.online. That's constitution.whiskeymusings.online. That'll dump you right to the page to buy that leather-bound Constitution. And do me a favor, go and check out the Institute on the Constitution today. And I thank them for allowing me to be an affiliate and brand ambassador. And yes, 3 Chevy, I do wish I had a 100-year guarantee against defects. But I gotta tell you, if you ask my wife, I am totally defective from the factory. You might even be able to ask my mother. She might be able to tell you that I'm defective directly from the factory. But hey, you know what? She made me, so whatever. Sorry, I digress. All right. Let's go ahead and get the show started here let's talk about this day in our American history. All right, and of course, for On This Day in American History, I take it from the American Patriots Almanac, written by William J. Bennett and John T.E. Cribb. This is a book that you can get at bookstores all across the United States. It has great daily information as well as bonus content in between every single month for our American history. It's got some great stuff in here. And let me go ahead and get it open to today's page, talking about the National March. Now, John Philip Sousa, a longtime leader of the U.S. Marine Band, as well as his own concert band, was perhaps the most famous American musician of his day. He spent a lifetime as a musical ambassador for the United States, conducting thousands of concerts in cities across the country and around the world. His compositions ranged from waltzes to operas, but his most beloved tunes were his marches, including Semper Fidelis, the Washington Post, and his most famous Stars and Stripes Forever. Sousa wrote Stars and Stripes Forever as a salute to his country. The music came to him in December 1896 as he steamed home from Europe after receiving word that the manager of his band had suddenly died. He later wrote, "Here came one of the most vivid incidents of my career. As the vessel, the Teutonic, steamed out of the harbor, I was pacing on the deck, absorbed in thoughts of my manager's death and the many duties and decisions which awaited me in New York. Suddenly, I began to sense a rhythmic beat of a band playing within my brain. Throughout the whole tense voyage, that imaginary band continued to unfold the same themes, echoing and re-echoing the most distinct melody. I did not transfer a note of that music to paper while I was on the steamer, but when we reached shore, I set down the measures that my brain band had been playing for me, and not a note of it has ever changed. Sousa died in 1932 at the age of 77. Stars and Stripes Forever was the last song he ever conducted. On December 10th, 1987, the piece became America's official march. The U.S. Marine Band carries on the tradition of playing Stars and Stripes Forever in performances across the country. And that is today's On This Day in American History. All right. So, what am I drinking tonight, everybody? Everybody keeps asking me that. Okay. So, what I am drinking, of course, tonight is the Four Roses Single Barrel Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey. And for those of you that, listen to the Mark K Show, Mark is doing a trip at the end of March and first couple days in April, doing a tour of Kentucky wineries. I am not going to be able to go there. Not this time around anyway. If he does it again, so be it. But I am planning on being at his poker tournament for next year, which is slated for the 30th of November. It's a Thursday, right before December. All right. Let's see where. Okay. So let's go ahead and just kind of recap. Let me get a little drink first. This has got like a little bit of a spice aftertaste that kind of hits. It's not bad. Not bad. But it's really good. It's a really good spice aftertaste. It kind of, it's just that kind of a spicy bite. And I just like it. I like it. I like it a lot. Thank you to Bonnie and, of course, her husband, Fat Paws, for sending it on the way. All right, for getting me onto it, because it's rapidly becoming my first choice at this moment for a regular sipping whiskey, and not like a special one, because we all have our special ones, but just a regular sipping whiskey for that. Okay, so obviously anyone who is anyone has heard about the Twittergate saga, and the left has been trying to downplay it. The right has been, of course, eagerly awaiting the next dumps that come out. And the last dump that we had pretty much basically told us kind of what we already knew, which essentially was that the Hunter Biden laptop story was actively suppressed. Several accounts that were on the social media site were also suppressed. At the same time, there was conversations with regards to interactions between Twitter and Facebook and Google have been accused. If you watched my last episode, Facebook and Google were a part of these meetings with the FBI, the CISA, which is a Department of Homeland Security division, and then, just a couple of other various agencies. The DOJ was implicated at one point outside of the FBI, and the Department of the ODNI, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, or something like that. But anyway, so basically government entities were meeting with all the social media companies, and supposedly, at least in the beginning, it was, them basically saying, hey, keep an eye out. We've got some possible nefarious bad actors coming up to the 2020 election. We don't want 2016. We don't want a repeat of 2016, which, again, they blamed Russia for, for interfering in our elections and so on and so forth. I mean, let's just get something straight. We know that that the foreign actors will try and skew our election. We know this is going to happen. I mean, they want to topple the most powerful country in the world. You know this. So none of this should come as a big surprise. In fact, in my opinion, Twitter, Facebook, Google, all of the social media companies should already be prepared. So there really shouldn't be a reason to have these meetings. And what's even worse is the fact that they actually accelerated the closer that you got to the election, meaning that they started off on a quarterly basis, then they went to a monthly, then they went to a almost weekly basis, if I remember correctly. And so, you know, all of these things have been happening. Now, if that was the end of it, if that was it, you could probably say, I mean, you could possibly say that maybe there was a reason for it, but that isn't where it stopped. What ended up happening, apparently, according to the other Twitter dumps, so Twitter dump number 3, which happened on Friday night by Barry Weiss. Barry Weiss put this string out. If you remember, it was Matt Taibbi for the first 2, and then the third one came through Barry Weiss. And basically what happened is they had tools at their disposal to do what essentially would be called shadow banning. Now, shadow banning, there's been some argument back and forth as to what shadow banning actually meant. But what it ultimately means is the ability to limit the reach of a particular account. Now, in particular, they attacked a conservative host, which I've talked about on this show, of Dan Bongino. They also attacked a conservative actor, real James Woods. And these 2 accounts in particular started, you know, sending out, obviously, and gained huge followings with regards to things like election malfeasance. You had, you know, things about COVID. In fact, we haven't even really seen anything on COVID yet. All of this has been based on the election for the most part, and the taking down of conservative accounts for those actions. We haven't even seen anything come out yet from these journalists about the about like any of the COVID doctors, the COVID quote unquote deniers or whatever. We haven't even seen any of that yet, and supposedly, according to Elon, that's coming. And it's probably just as bad. If I had to hazard a guess, it's probably just as bad. But in all throughout the third dump was basically the same kind of thread, which essentially was that the higher ups in these special groups, these moderating groups that were out there, they all pretty much tried to use as many of the tools as they possibly could to limit the ability of the accounts to take over and do things like Twitter trends or their visibility. And Dan Bongino talked a little bit about this. He said that he had a couple of people who he knew closely that they would go and search for his account and they wouldn't be able to find it. It would come up with something different. It wouldn't even come up with Bongino. I mean, let's face it, Bongino is a very unique name. You would think that that would be at the top of the search list if you were to search it. But apparently that didn't happen. And so some of the proof that Elon dropped through Barry was the fact that the account had some shadow banning or some search bans and search limits and things like that on it. Now, again, this is nothing revolutionary. We've pretty much already known this, okay? However, what we did not know, maybe we did know this, but what was not as clear was the fact that they did the exact same thing to the sitting president. At the time with Trump, they used all of those tools to try and keep the president, who had been exclusively using Twitter to circumvent the mainstream media and get his message out, which I'm going to be honest with you is probably one of his top abilities that he has done with his 4 years in office, was to expose the corruption and the bias of the mainstream media. Without that, many people probably wouldn't have had the proof to say whether or not the whether or not the mainstream media had any kind of a bias. We kind of had an idea with like CNN and stuff like that, but the ABCs, the NBCs, the CBSs of the world, who were the ones that started everything out way back in the day, they essentially, you know, he exposed them, and he gained, for essentially the first time ever, a direct line of communication to the people without having a filter of not only his own press secretary and the press corps, but, you know, the mainstream media and everything else, which is part of the reason why Twitter was so adamant, I think, why Twitter was so adamant about silencing him, because of the fact that he could actually state what he wanted to without anybody filtering it out or trying to backtrack or correct or anything else like what we see with Biden and what he ends up doing, okay? Now, this fourth Twitter dump, which occurred just before coming on to this program, okay? The Twitter Files Part 4 came out, and Twitter Files Part 4 was dropped by a third journalist interview person named Michael Schellenberger. And Michael Schellenberger released the specifically from January 6th to January 9th, which was a very focused look, into what happened with regards to January 6th. Now, the funny thing is that and let me go ahead and pull this up. This particular article comes from Fox News, but there are plenty of others out there, I'm sure, by now. So the latest installment, showing censorship within the social media giant, has actually focused on Donald Trump and, of course, the ultimate removal of his account. Okay. So he, as the pressure builds, so the removal of Trump, so this is Schellenberger posted as part of a larger thread. He says the removal of Donald Trump, January 7th. As the pressure builds, Twitter executives, build the case for a permanent ban. On January 7th, senior Twitter execs created justifications to ban Trump and seek a change of policy for Trump alone, distinct from other political leaders, and express no concern for the idea of free speech or democracy implications of a ban that this would have brought out. Okay. And this is true. They started looking around to see if they could find I don't know what's going on here. Which side is that? That's this side. Okay. See if maybe I can get rid of that little artifact. Sorry. Trying to get rid of a little artifact. There we go. That's better. All right. So the thing about it is with this whole thing is that the Twitter executives, so apparently because of this, they essentially are admitting that what Trump originally talked about and what Trump originally did not violate their terms of service, and that they had to modify those terms of service literally on the fly in order to be able to ban him from the program or from the application. Think about that for a second. They couldn't do it normally, so they had to find a way, and they modified their rules in order to fit within his tweets to make it so that they could get rid of him. And this is important because this honestly sums up the entire leftist Democrat ideology. If we can't get you under the regular rules, we'll just make up something on the fly and get you for that. And that is 100% the idea of a totalitarian government. Now, and as Outlaw Dogs point out, she says they made up a policy to fit a crime, which is exactly what they are doing right now with January 6th prisoners, with other political opponents, with the whole Mar-a-Lago thing. They are trying to find, they've got a person, and they are trying to find a crime that will fit with that person so they can persecute him. This is their pattern. This is exactly what they do. And it goes even farther than that, because after they finally did this change, they also said, hey, maybe we should keep these rules in place so that we can do them later if necessary. So essentially, and here's the tweet you can see from Michael Schellenberger. On January 7th, senior Twitter execs created justification to ban Trump, seek a change of policy for Trump alone, and separate him from other political leaders, and express no concern for free speech or democracy implications. Now, one of Trump's tweets actually got them really, really pissed off. And I don't have it. I wish I did. I don't have it for you tonight, but I can tell you it's there. And the tweet had to deal with him saying, "Go home in peace. We'll deal with this later," whatever. I mean, the one tweet that he basically said, "Stop doing what you're doing and go home and, leave the Capitol building, etc., and go home and just, be calmly, peacefully," whatever it was. I'm paraphrasing, obviously. But the thing about it is that one tweet really, really pissed him off. And that is demonstrated in some of these tweets that came out. Now, some interesting things has also come up about Yoel Roth. Yoel Roth was the guy who was apparently in charge of the safety, well, whatever the SI is now. I mean, just like all IT companies, they went and they freaking gave themselves acronyms, and so it's kind of hard to go through it without a glossary. But he was in charge of like the safety group or whatever. Well, it turns out that he has put out a few tweets, which people have gone back and taken a look at. And he put out a few tweets. One in particular that I saw had to deal with the fact that he was like, why can't high schoolers consent to sex? And it's like, wait a minute. And then he cites some article that was written and brought out. And apparently he also did some claim in his thesis, one of his degree theses, that sort of alludes to the same idea. So this guy Yoel he's starting to turn into a very, shall we say, questionable individual in terms of their motives. So anyway, I mean, this is just getting worse and worse and worse. The longer or the more that Elon digs, the worse he finds things, the more stuff that he finds. Now, so Jack apparently, now I want to make sure that you understand, Jack Dorsey was the head of Twitter at the time. And to be honest with you, Jack himself, he may not have been 100% privy to what's going on. And, I have to admit, Elon is kind of taking Jack's side on all of this. He is pretty much saying that Jack really didn't know about what was going on. And so, and here's sort of the suggestiveness that this is true, is the fact that there have been a couple of emails, a couple of times that Jack was kept out of the loop on some of this stuff, that it was really middle management that did this. And so apparently Jack emailed a bunch of employees on January 7th saying that Twitter needed to remain consistent in its policies, including the right of users to return to Twitter after a temporary suspension. And apparently Yoel Roth comes back and says that the people who care about this aren't happy with where we are. And you can see in the black, in the image back here, in the black, Jack's, Yoel Roth, and I quote, Jack's emails have been fine, but ultimately I think people want to hear from Vijaya or Dell or someone closer to the specifics of this who can reassure them that people who care about this are thinking deeply about these problems and aren't happy with where we are. A few engineers have reached out to me directly about it, and I'm chatting with them. But it's so clear they just want to know that someone is doing something about this. And it's not that we're ignoring the issues here. And then somebody who's blacked out responds with, I think there's also an opportunity to help people understand that while it seems obvious and simple that we should, and then it's cut off. Okay. So here's the thing. It was the middle management that seems to have done this. It was the middle management that seems to have been the ones that have been the driving force for all of this. But at the same time, though, Jack was at the top of the organization. And not only that, but he actually stated under oath in front of a congressional opinion or a committee that they did not do anything called shadow banning. Now, you could probably argue semantics about the whole thing, the idea of shadow banning, but let's face it, to the average person, a shadow ban basically means a limit of my reach. And so, again, to be completely honest, Jack perjured himself. Now, the funny thing is, Vijaya, Gotti, I think is how you pronounce her last name, she was sitting right there in the congressional hearing and did not bother trying to correct Jack. Okay. So again, I don't think that this totally absolves Jack of any wrongdoing. I do believe, just as some of the people in Rumble have been saying, if you own the company, you are responsible for it. And I agree with that. And I think there should be some kind of fallout for Jack because Jack hired these people and then allowed them to just sort of take over. And keep in mind too, that this was also right about the same time that Jack was looking to, dump his share of Twitter. He was pulling back. He didn't want to be a part of the board anymore. And I'm sure there's reasons for that. In fact, there might even be some reasons where he kind of maybe already knew, what was going on at his organization and wanted to distance himself from it. Okay. Now, so the thing about it is, though, is that Jack actually did kind of approve the rule change that was applied to Trump in particular. So Schellenberger tweets here, he goes, around 11:30 p.m., Roth DMs his colleagues with news that he is excited to share. Guess what? He writes, this is Yoel Roth. Jack just approved repeat offender for civic integrity. The new approach would create a system where 5 violations of strikes would result in a permanent suspension. And then a member of Roth's team goes, progress. And they obviously had been pushing for Dorsey to create greater restrictions on the speech that Twitter allows around elections. There's more to come on this. There really is. And honestly, this is probably, like I've said it before and I've said it again. So the Hunter Biden laptop suppression was probably the biggest countrywide factor that caused our election of the basement dummy. And I use the term election very loosely. This was definitely rigged against them because we've seen the polls. I mean, most people get a lot of their news from social media. So social media as a whole, with everything that Facebook did to do the suppression of the story, for what Google was doing in terms of suppressing conservatives and, they've been accused of suppressing emails that were going out from their Gmail accounts, from political Gmail accounts, and stuff like that. When and Twitter in particular, because now we know, because thankfully Elon has decided to release all of these files. This is going to be huge. Once this all gets figured out, this is going to be huge. And honestly, I think it should make some changes. Make some changes to Section 230 and the laws protecting these organizations. Realistically, I think it may not go anywhere. I don't know. But at the same time, I mean, I don't want government to get involved in this. However, we do need to understand that there is a argument that can be made that these social media sites are the new de facto town squares, which means that they fall under First Amendment protections because of the fact that you've got so many people who are out here doing this. And so I honestly believe that there should be, I mean, this is something obviously that the founders could not have even imagined. But realistically, I believe that you could make the case and make the argument for the fact that because these digital media are being used in the place of and in conjunction with both the print media, which was the standard back when the First Amendment was first put out there, as well as video media like what I'm doing right now. All of this should be considered protected speech in terms of the First Amendment, with the same kind of safeguards for things like criminal activity and so on and so forth, okay, that have already been applied in most cases and so on and so forth. The key here is 230 breaks down the idea of platforms versus publishers. Music Man kind of just pointed that out and basically said as long as they're not platforms versus publishers, and the difference apparently is a publisher would be something like the New York Times, the Washington Post, the New York Post, something like that, where they are publishing stories that they have to show or have to demonstrate that they are not publishing things that are nefarious. And there are rules and restrictions with regards to things like libel and slander and that kind of stuff that can get into the legal ramifications. The advantage of being a platform and not a publisher is that being a platform, and this is the whole centric point around social media, is that by being a platform, they're not legally responsible for what gets posted up there. That they are essentially creating a conduit or a town square. So that being said, I mean, I can understand it as long as the term platform is done and applied in terms of a definition in the truest sense of the word, which essentially means that Twitter can't censor, Twitter, Facebook, etc. They can't censor anything unless it is criminally negligent, liability in that kind of sense. Things like, underage, or even just regular porn and that kind of stuff. Things that would normally be taken out within the confines of the typical social sphere. But honestly, if somebody wants to stand up and talk about, just as an example, Mein Kampf being a great work of art, that should be allowed. Regardless of the uproar that it might take, it still should be allowed because a person can, they can make their case for that kind of a statement. Now, whether or not anybody wants to listen to that person as they make those statements, who knows? But if you're not outright threatening somebody, or you're not outright doing something that would be otherwise considered illegal, then honestly, it should be allowed in the public square. And that's the thing. Okay. So anyway, all right, enough on that. There's going to be more to come. Supposedly there is yet another journalist who will be doing another Twitter dump. Elon seems to be like spreading the wealth to a lot of different places. By the way, Barry Weiss has been, totally amping up and promoting her new free journalism site or whatever. Anyway, she's hired some people and stuff. She started off from scratch and that kind of thing. So anyway, and yes, Alan, that's exactly what I mean. Alan says that when they block your post and suspend your account, they aren't a platform. They are choosing what you can post, and that makes them a publisher, which is true. Which again, that's the case that I'm kind of making. As long as if you want to have the protections of, hey, whatever somebody posts online, I'm a platform, not a publisher, so therefore I can't be held liable but for what a third party posts on my site. At the same time, that turns you, when you start suppressing the speech of others that is not criminal, not regularly illegal, then you're looking at being a publisher and not a platform. And that, I think, is where this is gonna come down to it. Okay. All right. So let's move on from Twitter. I've already covered that quite enough. So Sinema. Kristen Sinema, who arguably within the first couple of years between her and Joe Manchin, they were kind of the fly in the ointment, per se, for the Democrats. Joe Manchin was a little bit more than what Kristen Sinema was. However, what she did today is, or not today, but this week, is she basically announced that she is no longer going to be part of the Democrat Party. Now, of course, the whole uproar out of this is the fact that, what does this do to the balance in the Senate? Because as you know, the balance in the Senate is a 51, I think it's 51-49 when we had the elections and when Raphael Warnock won in Georgia. This doesn't really change anything in terms of the power vacuum that's been going on in the Senate. This doesn't really change anything. The Democrats still maintain power in the Senate. And, her going independent doesn't really do anything, ironically, for any of her committee appointments that she had. She keeps all of those. In fact, Schumer confirmed that today. Okay. The reason why she is allowed to do that is because of the fact that she has clearly stated that she is not going to caucus with the Republican Party. Now, what is a caucus? Basically, what a caucus is it is the group of individuals who want to be a part of the power or the leadership within the political body. In terms of the Senate, you have a couple of independents already. Shoot, I can't think of his name right now. Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders claims to be an independent, but he always caucuses with the Democrats, which is why they kind of let him do his thing. Kristen Sinema was a Dem, and she caucused with the Dems, and she has, now that she's moved into her independent state, she has not stated outwardly that she will continue to caucus with the Dems. However, what she has stated outwardly is that she will not caucus with the Republicans. Now, because of the numbers and the caucuses and the meetings that they have and so on and so forth, setting the agendas and putting in the committee meetings and the committee leadership and everything else comes from these caucuses. Because of that, because she basically has said she's not going to go for the Republicans, that basically means nothing really changes. So if nothing really changes, then what's the point in her dropping or drop kicking the Dem logo and going to independent? Well, in her home state of Arizona, there is suggestions that if she were to stay a Democrat, that she would have been primaried in the next cycle. So if she gets if she stayed as a Dem, she would have likely lost her Senate seat. So the whole purpose in doing this, it has nothing to do with her conscience, like she says, has nothing to do with any of her, change in ideas, which ironically, when she was elected, she came in as being like this huge uber leftist, and she's actually turned into more of a moderate in terms of her voting record. But the thing about it is that she now protects herself from getting primaried. So now all she has to do, realistically, is convince the voters, the total electorate in Arizona, to be able to vote for her. And by going independent, she hopes that she can actually be sort of like a John McCain, which essentially is, a centrist, and be able to pull some of the McCain-type Republicans as well as the more moderate Democrats to be able to keep her seat in the Senate. So this is 100%, and I'm saying this, okay, this is my opinion. This is 100% keeping her job and keeping herself in the Senate. She's just trying to save her butt. That's literally all this is. And it's not going to change anything as far as the Senate Democrats are concerned. They're still going to be in power. They're still going to be able to do the things that they're doing. They still have a majority, the 51 votes. They can still push, likely, the 51 votes. They can still push, things like judicial appointments through and that kind of stuff with a simple majority, because they removed the filibuster for the judicial appointments and so on and so forth. So nothing, it's pretty much the same. It's still going to be status quo. However, what this does do is put an incredible amount of pressure on Manchin, believe it or not. So here's an article from Just the News, and I pulled this up. So take a look at this. So all eyes are on Manchin's future as a Democrat after Sinema left the party. All right. So as we all know, Joe Manchin held up the original Build Back Better plan, but worked out a deal, which he got stabbed in the back for the Inflation Reduction Act, which is actually the Inflation Inducing Act, which was a rewrapping and nice, pretty bow name of a Green New Deal. Okay. So all of that is basically makes it interesting for Manchin, and it puts him in a special position once again, just like he has been in the last couple of years, in the fact that if he decides to go independent, which, considering the fact that he is a Democrat in a mostly red state, and West Virginians have been, based on all of the polling data that we have and the information coming out of that he basically is going to be on the outs. He might think about going independent rather than being a part of the Democrat Party. Now, if he does that, that would change a few things in terms of the Democrat majority. Now, again, this all boils down to whether or not he caucuses with the Dems, which he probably will. However, he is in a very interesting position. And so things like the very narrow majority that they have in the Senate, if they cannot get every single Democrat on board, he and Sinema now are both, it's still kind of in the same place that they were before. The only difference is, instead of just one of them screwing it up, they now have to have both on the Republican side in order to screw it all up. Okay. Now, that being said, again, both of these people will probably be doing this as a political maneuver to try to save their own asses and keep their seats in the Senate. This has nothing to do necessarily with political power, political power here or within the Senate. they are still going to vote with the Democrats. They're still going to be a part of the Democrat caucus. Neither one of them is really going to want to go with the Republicans as much as we would love to do it. So, honestly, this doesn't change anything as far as the overall makeup of the Senate. All it does is it just gives a little bit of the nuances within the Senate for the Democrats to be playing around with. Okay. All right. So, we're going to switch gears here, and I'm going to I got to take a second. I want to welcome a couple people, or at least one person over on Twitch. I have somebody up in Alaska. It's 5:49 Alaska time, according to SH Naple. I can't tell if that's an I or an L. Sorry, bad eyes. But anyway, welcome to the program. Just tuning in, I appreciate it. They're in Kenai, Alaska. That's great. Thank you very much for joining. And as for those of you that may not have heard, I expanded. It's Shinaple. Okay. I hope I got that right. Anyway, so the Twitch, hi Twitch person. This is over on Rumble. Hi Twitch person. And also, by the way too, I've lost a couple of subscribers. I think actually what ended up happening is a couple bots on Rumble, came and joined my account. So I am now back to 448 rather than 450 subscribers. So do me a favor, if this is your first time here and you like the program, you like what I do, check out my other videos. I mean, I'm not for everybody, and I get that. But if you haven't subscribed yet, head on over to Rumble and do me a favor and, hit that subscribe button. If you don't have a Rumble account, sign up. It's free. Just like all of these other ones are. It's free. Sign up and then head on over to Rumble and subscribe for me. I do appreciate that. All right. So a couple of episodes ago, I had my buddy, Steven Stiles on, who is a podcaster, strictly in regards to hockey. He's a hockey lover. Okay. He loves hockey. And we were talking in particular about the article or the claim that the NHL, is too white. Okay. So that being said, this report came out from Breitbart, and I had seen this before, and I was kind of like, oh my gosh, this is going to be a mess. But, let me just show you. Okay. So apparently the NHL sponsored an all trans tournament. Okay. Now again, I'm going to clearly state 100% for the record. If you are trans, that is entirely up to you. You're an adult, that is entirely up to you. However, understandably though, there are specific differences, physical differences, between a male body or a biological male body and a biological female body. There are physical differences between the two. Okay. Can't get away with it. All right. So, this kind of a setup. All right. This kind of a setup is, it's fraught with potential dangers. Okay. Honestly. The thing about it is that, we know that men and women have physical differences, and that, the whole idea of, I can't even think of his name now. Leah Thomas. The whole idea of Leah Thomas swimming against the women. Before he became trans, he was in the male division and was ranked at like 400th. Okay. But realistically, what ended up happening is that he jumped over to the women's division, called himself transgender, jumped over to the women's division and clearly outpaced and beat, just about every woman's record in swimming completely. So, there's plenty of evidence. They've done it in track and field. There's plenty of evidence that basically demonstrates that, biological men should not be in biological women's sports. I'm sorry. I just don't. I just don't. I don't agree with it. I don't think it makes sense for that to happen. And this article just basically further proves my point. So the further proves my point basically is there's a report where a male hockey player sends a female to the ER with a concussion during the NHL-sponsored all-trans tournament. Now, keep in mind, hockey is a very physical sport. Can't deny that. Just like American football, and I call it American football because, of course, European football is actually considered soccer in the Americans. But the point here is that, once again, we have irrefutable proof that there is a specific danger when you have biological men competing in contact sports. The MMA had a biological man fight in the women's division, totally crushed, somebody's facial and, orbital bones of face and everything else. And so, yeah, this kind of a setup is really pretty bad, as far as that goes. So, let's see what kind of, I've got a couple people popping in over at Twitch. They're promoting things. Anyway, I'm not familiar enough with Twitch to be able to moderate necessarily. I think I can moderate stuff. Let's see, what do I do? No. Anyway. Okay. So yeah, I mean, it's possible. It's possible it's a bot. I don't know. I don't know enough about Twitch just yet to be able to moderate everything. So that's one of the sad things. Okay. So another thing that happened in this kind of thing, we know that there's been a push from this administration in order to have hospitals and everything push the whole transgender ideology to the kids, and to especially push what they are calling transgender affirming surgeries for all of these. And yeah, 3 Chevy, it looks like I don't have the wrench in the chat or on that particular guy. So anyway, all right. So you've seen this administration push it. In fact, they were going to push it so much that that it was basically going to be kind of a law. They wanted to make a law that requires these hospitals to push gender affirming care onto kids, including gender change surgeries and things like that. Well, apparently there is a court, and this is through Breitbart, but apparently there is a lawsuit going on in federal court, and now the federal court has permanently blocked the Biden gender transition mandate, which is a good thing. I mean, honestly. Now, that being said, do I really think that the federal government should be involved in this at all? This is kind of one of those things that I sort of think falls in the same realm as things like marriage and so on and so forth. If it's not defined in the Constitution, the federal government should not be a part of it. Now, if a state government gets involved, that's fine. Okay. But the thing about it is that this is ridiculous. They're trying to litigate us and regulate us into things that we may or may not believe in. And if these doctors don't feel like they should be doing this or don't agree with the whole idea, then they shouldn't be doing it. I mean, they shouldn't be doing it at all. Okay. This should not be happening, period. And, anyway, so I guess the federal appeals court went ahead and permanently blocked it for the moment. the mandate on the doctors and hospitals, forcing them to perform gender transition procedures against their conscience. Now, obviously, we have a Supreme Court case right now with the web designer who has claimed religious freedom. And so that court case that was heard earlier last week, and now it's starting to go into deliberation. We'll probably get a ruling on it, say early spring or maybe even late spring. I don't know. Depends on the court's workload. And so, this is really boiling down, or we're going to really be boiling down to something like religious freedom, which is one of the things that have been a guiding principle and a tenet of our American system. And so stuff like this, where, a doctor basically says, hey, I don't feel like I should be giving you this. I don't feel like this is a viable option for you. The same thing happened with the whole COVID thing. There were doctors that were wanting to prescribe ivermectin, which, by the way, I don't know if you've noticed, just a little side note, ivermectin, the FDA has been saying that ivermectin doesn't work. And then, of course, links on their website have been pointing to studies that show that it does. So, yeah. Anyway, the point being that I'm making here is that the federal government realistically shouldn't be able to do anything but what's in the Constitution. That's basically done by the 10th Amendment. The 10th Amendment clearly states that if it's not in the Constitution, the federal government doesn't need to be involved. Same thing goes with abortion. Same thing goes with marriage. Same thing goes with this. Now, if the state decides to do something, that's entirely up to them. And then, of course, they have to answer to the state constituents. But anyway, the point is that this is kind of interesting that this has come out. And once again, Biden, who I think is on track to be the number one president who has been overturned by the courts in history, potentially, this is something that just came out that I just thought was very, very interesting. And once again, it's about protecting the kids. I mean, kids have a bad enough time anyway when they're going through puberty, trying to figure out, who they are and trying to fit and trying to belong, that we don't necessarily need to give them life-altering surgery and irreversible, by the way, irreversible surgery. And doing this as a permanent basis for them before they become an adult. Now, again, I've maintained this on a program. Once you become an adult, once you become, an adult human being, make whatever decision you want. But until then, you literally shouldn't be making these kinds of choices at such a young age, where it's been medically proven that you haven't built up the frontal lobe, which is where all of our reason and logic and that kind of stuff comes from. Okay. So that's just my position. You can sue me, whatever. No, don't sue me, please. Anyway. All right. So let me go ahead. I've got one more article here that's really, really quick, and then we'll get into questions for Whiskey. So right here, we have a Newsmax article. Joe Biden has gone through and he's been talking over and over and over again about how wonderful our economy is. Well, many signs point to it not, and that he's essentially either lying or just doesn't understand, probably both. But this popped today in Newsmax. Apparently, the U.S. Federal Reserve, put out a report that said that the U.S. household wealth fell by $400 billion in the third quarter, as a drop in U.S. stock prices outpaced gains in real estate values. Now, for those of you that don't know, U.S. household wealth has a combination or a deal with things like savings, with checking accounts, so on and so forth. They kind of compile a lot of this. And anyway, the point is that our net worth, household net worth, declined to 143.3 trillion at the end of September, and it was at 143.7 trillion at the end of June. The Fed did a quarterly snapshot in the national balance sheet, and it was the third consecutive quarter that household wealth has declined. All right. So realistically, I mean, as much as Joe Biden wants to claim that we've got, all these wonderful jobs that he, created or whatever, we all know that's not the case. Most of that stuff came back from COVID, so on and so forth. There's other signs that are out there that show that the economy itself and individuals' wealth is dropping based on and due to the economy. Okay. The home price growth has slowed. We're going to start, there's even some talk of a real estate bubble bursting. I can tell you that in many places around the country, real estate is at what I would consider a fairly unsustainable pricing index, in many, many cases. So anyway, the point being is I wanted to bring it to your attention is that there are other indicators that are out there other than CPI, PPI, stock market, et cetera, that are also all pointing to the fact that Joe Biden has essentially screwed us when it comes to the economy. For the most part, like this was ever really any kind of question, because Barack Obama told us a long time ago, which we should have taken heed, that don't underestimate Joe Biden's ability to F things up. All right. So it is now time for, let me find it here. Questions for Whiskey. All right, and as I stated, this comes in from Buddy Weiser from over on Rumble. And Buddy asks, hey, Whiskey, what is the purpose of an executive order in a representative republic like ours? Also, what are the limits in regards to its legal use? Thank you. Well, Buddy and the rest of my Whiskey Warriors, let me explain something to you about executive orders. All right. An executive order basically is a mandate or a dictate that the president puts out. And, it can be a memorandum. It can be all kinds of different things. But the point is that it is originally designed to act similarly to a law. Now, the only thing about this, in terms of acting similarly to a law, in terms of our viewpoint of it, is the fact that there are some exceptions and some boundaries that an executive order cannot cross. An executive order cannot change or modify a law that Congress has put forward. Okay? We saw that in the executive order with the OSHA and the mask mandate and the vaccine mandate. So his executive order making it to where OSHA makes it a requirement for all people who are working to have a vaccine mandate, that was overturned by the courts. And the reason being was because of the fact that OSHA, first of all, the law that created OSHA from Congress did not have vaccine requirements within it. And so his executive order modifying that law from Congress, which again, Congress is the legislative branch. They are the ones who are solely responsible, according to our Constitution, for all legislative activities, including the purse strings, by the way, which is why his executive order for taking out the student loans is likely going to be overturned, because it extends past his power to do so. But that pretty much is what an executive order is. It's essentially a mandate from the executive branch. Now, you have to understand that the executive branch is the place where laws get executed to the faithful, to the full faith and credit of the United States, or however it's written. But anyway, the point is the executive branch, the Congress makes the law, the executive branch and the presidency enact and enforce the law. And that's basically how the separation of powers is supposed to work. The other thing is that if an executive order extends past Congress and the congressional powers that have been given to the president by a particular law, then what can happen is the Supreme Court can step in and say, you've overstepped your bounds. And so this is where the whole idea of taking Joe Biden to court over his executive orders comes into play. Okay. So the thing about it is that presidents actually use executive orders in many different fashions. Like Barack Obama said that I can, essentially rule by edict because I have a phone and a pen. Within reason, he can, but that doesn't mean that that he is able to do it if he tries to legislate using executive orders. That's where he kind of gets into trouble. And Congress can actually overturn executive orders as well. They can create a law that will overturn the need for an executive order. So, for an example, the thing about the whole border situation, if Congress really and truly wanted to take care of the border situation, they could literally write a law that basically states that nobody gets through. Conversely, they could also write a law that everybody can come through. So Congress can write those laws and override the executive orders that have been put out by Biden or presidents ahead of him. And of course, the president can then take that law and veto it if he wants to keep it as an executive order. And then, of course, it would go to the courts, and the courts would have to, hash it out. But the thing about it is, again, executive orders ideally were supposed to be just used for the executive branch to carry out the administration of the laws that have been put in place by Congress. And executive orders historically have been done all throughout history. In fact, I think George Washington is the only president that did not do executive orders. FDR is the most executive orders ever given, something like 3,700 plus, throughout history. And even when you look at just the past 3 or 4 presidents, you had Barack Obama had something like 300 some. George Bush, George W. Bush, Bush younger. He had something like 290. Even Donald Trump had less than what we've seen so far. I think maybe not in total, but definitely less than in his first year as Joe Biden. And so basically, hold on, 3 Chevy. Let me get you the exact number. You're saying 3,700. The exact number, let me see, was 3,721 total orders. And he holds the record for the most issued. Okay. So the thing about it is that executive orders, again, are essentially supposed to be memorandums that will help with the implementation of a law, the administration of a law, maybe have something to do with the enforcement of a law, but they can't overextend their reach, which is what Joe Biden has consistently done throughout his 2+ years in terms of executive orders. Now, I have 3 links in the show notes in the description with regards to executive orders, and I would highly encourage you go and take a look at those. You can take a look at let's see, it's Heritage Foundation. The Heritage Foundation has a explanation on executive orders. You also have the Executive Orders 101, which is a primer from the National Constitution Center. And then I also included a link that goes to the Congressional Research Service that talks about executive orders, issuance, modification, and revocation. Now, executive orders, again, for the most part, were designed to do things in the administration purposes or the execution of laws and those kinds of things. They basically were supposed to outline how a law might be implemented if it wasn't very clearly defined. It also was to do things in an emergency fashion. So yeah, it just they're not supposed to be, governance by dictatorial edict, which is essentially what they're looking at. That's what Obama did. That's what Biden is looking to do. Thankfully, we have enough people who are attempting and taking him to court over his executive orders. And I fully expect this student loan thing to go the way of the dodo, because even frickin' Nancy Pelosi said that the president doesn't have that power, that has to be from Congress, which constitutionally Congress holds the purse strings. Joe Biden doesn't. Whether he wants to think that he does is a whole another story. All right, well, that is it for me tonight. Again, do me a favor, head on over to Rumble if you haven't already. Get yourself an account if you haven't, and subscribe to the Whiskey Musings broadcast. So I have a couple of nights coming up here, and of course we're coming down into the holidays. So just remember, again, if you're planning on getting anything prior to Christmas from the Whiskey Musings gear store, that's at store.whiskeymusings.online. That's store.whiskeymusings, all one word, .online. You can go there and order before September 13th. After that, it probably won't make it to Christmas, or make it there before Christmas, which is fine. I mean, that's okay. You can get T-shirts and things like that. I've got hats. Just take a look through the store. The other thing is, I am not planning on transmitting Christmas Eve. So Christmas Eve, I will not be doing a show, which is perfectly fine. However, I am thinking, and I'm trying to get this figured out, but I am thinking of doing a show for New Year's Eve. And that show would basically be probably a lot longer. I would think, I'm thinking about starting at my usual time at 6 p.m., and then, which is 9 p.m. Eastern, and then going all the way till just after midnight. Let me know what you think about that if you want to in the comments of all the videos, or you can send me an email. Also, if you have a burning question for Questions for Whiskey, send that to fans, F-A-N-S, at whiskeymusings.online. That's fans, F-A-N-S, at whiskeymusings.online. And I will get that also on Wednesday. I've got a great pet of the week for you. I've got 2 or 3 already, or actually I think 3 or 4 already lined up for that. So we'll see you Wednesday night. Enjoy your weekend. And we'll see you next time on the Whiskey Musings broadcast. Good night, everybody.